Sanna Marin, thank you so much for joining us on Euronews. I want to ask you about what is the most consequential election this year so far, and that is Hungary. It's a defeat, crushing defeat of Viktor Orban and a massive landslide to the opposition of Peter. What does that say to you about Europe?
Well, of course, I think it gives hope to Europe, and I know that I am, and I know that many in Hungary and many in Europe are relieved with this outcome of the election, of the Hungarian parliamentary elections, because it also gives now much more space of solutions about Ukraine. We all know that Orban have Ukraine under his pressure on many occasions and many situations. So, of course, we hope that now things will flow forward.
So there's been this idea of Hungary that perhaps moves closer to Europe.
To Europe, liberal values, the European future that we hope, because we are united and we need each other. 27 member states, we decide together and we need unanimity. And if there are those that block common decisions together, sometimes with others, but mostly by themselves, then we have a problem within the whole system.
And you speak about liberal values of Europe. You defended those values too. So I wonder, would you have voted for someone like Peter?
Well,
I see you
I'm
two
a Finnish
not
citizen.
exactly the same.
I'm a Finnish citizen, so of course I wouldn't vote anybody from Hungary. I would vote in Finland. I'm a social democrat, I'm a leftist, I'm very liberal, I'm a feminist. So of course there are differences, but I think I'm looking at this mostly of the perspective of Europe. The unity that we need, the decisions that we need to make, especially concerning Ukraine, but also otherwise. So I think this gives us an opportunity to reach an outcome on decisions and situations that need to resolve.
Over the past few weeks, we've seen tapes that leaked of alleged conversations, and some of them caught on tape very openly, between the Hungarians and the Russians. Is that something that you suspected? And is it just a red line has been crossed already? The idea that this communication was certainly happened before and after meetings?
Of course, I have worked together with Viktor Orban in European Council, and we have had many difficult situations and discussions, for example, concerning Finland's and Sweden's NATO membership. And we know that Orban has very different view on the war in Ukraine, and also, for example, rule of law, applying rule of law in Europe.
Ukraine cannot win it. He said objectively, Ukraine cannot win it. You've said Ukraine can win it. So
Ukraine must win it. I would say Ukraine must win it. If Ukraine doesn't win the war or have an outcome on a peace negotiations that will be sustainable, that would be fair for the Ukrainian citizens, and that will provide security to Europe and to Ukraine in the future. If we won't have that, we as Europe, we are under jeopardy, because Russia is, as we speak, they are preparing themselves, they're modernizing their army, and they're preparing themselves to much wider fight.
So they're preparing for war with Europe? The rest of the continent?
I wouldn't rule that out. And we also need to prepare. And for that, we need strong Ukraine, because Ukraine has the largest, most functional and modern army with modern warfare experience. And without Ukraine, we are vulnerable. We need their lessons learned. We need their help. And we need to understand that we are as dependent on Ukraine and Ukrainian capabilities, that Ukraine is dependent on our help. We need their capabilities when it comes, for example, building drones, innovating and transforming their military capabilities. We need their expertise, and we need to understand how bad we need it. We are now, when we are building our own defense capabilities and reaching that 5% target, hopefully, that we have set together in NATO, it also, and actually even more so, depends where we use that money, not only how much, but where we use that money. If we use it on wrong direction, old-fashioned, traditional models that cost a huge amount of money, and not the ones that are actually used on the battlefield, then we will just waste every euro that we spend.
And you mentioned NATO. There's been a lot of friction over the past few weeks. Certainly the president of the U.S. making it very clear that he believes the Europeans have done very little in Iran, and also has said that NATO without the U.S. is a paper tiger. When I hear these words, this is exactly what Russia would like to hear. NATO is a paper tiger, and the U.S. may consider reassessing their relationship. How concerned are you? Because a country like yours certainly needs a strong NATO.
I'm very glad and I still support our decision joining NATO. I think it was the right one. At the same time, we have to understand and realize that NATO is a different organization now than it was when we and Sweden joined.
Because Trump is a president?
Because of the changing relationship between US and Europe, it has already changed and it is changing, and this is a fact that we cannot escape. And it means that we need to focus on our own game. Now we are speaking European defense capabilities and European unity, European military forces, and I think this is extremely necessary discussion, and we should also discuss more about the European nuclear deterrence. This is a discussion that I see happening already and the necessity to have it.
When I hear about the nuclear capabilities and deterrence and sort of extending this umbrella across Europe, what that says to me is the Europeans, they are preparing for a plan B in which if there is an attack, you're not going to call the US. You're going to figure out how you defend yourself and how the Europeans defend themselves together. Is that what it is? Is this realization that a plan B is now needed?
I would be prepared from different scenarios. This is the way that the Finnish mentality works because we have such a difficult history with Russia. We don't wish those things that are happening in the world now, but they are facts, they are happening. And we need to be prepared also for the harsher times. And also when it comes to the relationship between US and Europe, we cannot only walk the path that we wish to be, we have to walk the path that might be. And that's why we need to be prepared, and that's why we are having the discussion of the European alternatives. And I think it is an important discussion. But at the same time, we want US to be a strong part of NATO. We want US presence in Europe. We want US nuclear deterrence to be there also in the future. So I don't see these ruling themselves or each other out, but we need to prepare for every scenario.
So you see a NATO that is still standing together collectively around Article 5 in the next 5 to 10 years to come. That is still the scenario that you see.
That is a scenario that I hope, but I would also prepare every scenario out there.
And of course you were in office and you say we as Finnish, we have to be prepared for every scenario. Have you ever thought what that could look like? To have a contingency plan for modern warfare, which not necessarily means an attack on the border?
I think it is extremely important to understand all across Europe that the warfare and the threats are not anymore only connected to geography. With drone technology, with the use of AI, mapping out critical infrastructure extremely fast, with space technologies, with all the things that is now created and will be created, you cannot anymore rely that you're safe when you're farther away from the border. So of course you are more in jeopardy. We have that long border with Russia and we understand what kind of enemy we are dealing with, what kind of neighbor we are dealing with.
You think of Russia as an enemy?
Well, Russia is attacking European country. Yes, Russia is an enemy as we speak. They're attacking European country. They are violating international law. They are an enemy. And I think we need to make sure that they won't win war in Ukraine, but Ukraine will win and maintain as an independent country. But what I was saying, that we know it. We know the pressure because we are near to Russia. But you need to also understand in Portugal, in Spain, in French, that you're not safe even though you're further away from the border because of the new threats and because of the new technologies. You can plant drones anywhere. You can map out critical infrastructure with AI, with the speed that you don't even understand. You can use these technologies also to attack other countries. So you also need to be prepared elsewhere and not fool yourselves into the idea that we are safe and we don't have to do anything.
You said it at the beginning of our interview. You are very pro-Europe. You are very liberal. You've said, I am a feminist. But you also know the international zeitgeist. The pendulum has really changed from progressive ideas to what is seen now as a global conservative movement that would argue perhaps you are too woke. So how would you respond to that? And do you see that pendulum switching back?
There's always a pendulum movement. The most thing that I now worry is the lack of respect of international rules and laws. The fact that the rules-based international order is under questioning, even threatened, and that we don't want to build any more world where we work together in a civilized way, but we are going the direction again where pure violence or strength dictates the outcomes. And from a small country perspective like Finland, that kind of future is extremely frightening because we cannot ever have that kind of strength and power that the big players have. So I worry a lot this pendulum movement that is going the direction of demolishing the international structures that we built together after Second World War, saying never again. And now we are in this situation.
The goal is to demolish international rules.
Well, as we see, there is
cultural battle.
There is this ideology again rising that made the strongest men win, and we need to.
And we're two women.
We need to push back, and we need to remind that there was a reason why we built those structures before. And if we go to that direction, we will only end up in a similar kind of situations where we ended up for World War I, World War II. It wasn't a coincidence that these structures were invented, created, built.
As a final question, you were in office, you were a politician, but you also became a sort of media sensation. There was a fixation with the things that you would do, the things you would wear, your looks, whether you were out and about and who you were with. Was that something that had an impact on you, and how are you feeling now?
Well, I think those are things that come with the job. Of course, I would have wished that media focus would always be on the issues, on my job, on the things that I was handling. But of course, I think every politician nowadays feel more and more pressure also from the intensive, not maybe with everybody a scrutiny, but the interest of personal issues, personal things, looks, appearance. And I think this is frustrating, especially to politicians, because they usually want to focus on the work and the issues why they joined their parties and run for office in the first place.
Well, Sanna Marin, thank you so much for joining us on Euronews. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.